Welcome to Adelaide, Australia, where the concrete canyons frame the wildest race in Formula One. The first Australian Grand Prix produced the last victory for world champion Keke Rosberg, whose Williams Honda led a field of just 8 survivors. In 1986, Nigel Mansell suffered a spectacular blowout in Adelaide, and Alain Prost got the miracle victory he needed to clinch the world title. A year later, Prost himself overstepped the bounds of traction on the streets of Oz. Ayrton Senna's Lotus was disqualified. The title went to Nelson Piquet and a Williams, the race to the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger. 1988 was a typically chaotic year down under. Big crashes and bigger spins befell nearly everyone, including Mansell's underpowered Williams Judd. The McLaren twins, Prost and Senna, finished 1-2 for the 10th time that season, a year in which they swept 15 of 16 races. In 1989, the race was washed in rain and controversy. Prost, now driving for Ferrari, quit after a lap and told everyone who would listen that it was too dangerous. But the race went on, slick roads making it the wildest edition yet. And Belgian Terry Boutsen won for Williams. 1990 was dry in Australia, but the red mist that leads a driver to ask more than his machine can deliver caught up one car after another. New world champion Ayrton Senna was in full flight, right up to the moment he stuck his McLaren in the wall. The only thing between Nigel Mansell's Ferrari and victory was Nelson Piquet's green Benetton, and that's the way Piquet kept it to the finish. In 91, Adelaide was wet again. As ever, the race went on, but it wouldn't last for long. Within minutes, everyone in the starting field was losing the fight for traction, slithering helplessly off the road like Gerhard Berger. Leader Senna begged officials to stop the debacle. After 14 laps, they did. Another page in a scrapbook of bizarre events down under. Last year, fans were stunned by the sight of the world's best colliding. Senna and Mansell flew off the track together. Mansell headed off for IndyCars, while Senna began an off-season of discontent with the McLaren team. Riccardo Patrese inherited the lead until his Williams broke, and Gerhard Berger took his second Adelaide victory. This year, 2 more great champions meet for what may be the last time, as Prost and Senna go head-to-head down under. ESPN, the world leader in motorsports coverage, presents Speed World. While winter comes calling in the Northern Hemisphere, summer is just around the corner down under as the Formula One World Championship reaches its final race, the Grand Prix of Australia. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Barsha. Welcome to the final race of the 1993 season. For it, we have come to the country that is a continent, Australia, and the home of the Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide. It seems there's always a startling headline when the teams come here, and this year is no exception. We take you back 2 weeks to the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Ayrton Senna joined Alain Prost on the front row, got the better start, and together he and Prost launched into a race of their own. While the world champions battled, Michael Schumacher tried a pass on Damon Hill and paid for his aggression with a broken suspension. As dark clouds gathered, Senna stopped for a change of slicks, a fatal error for most when the rain finally fell. But not for the Brazilian 3-time world champion, whose otherworldly car control allowed him to storm past Prost and race away into the lead. New world champ Prost had his hands full, sliding off the track at one point, but returning to finish second. As the track dried, Damon Hill watched in his mirrors as Senna dueled with Grand Prix debutant Eddie Irvine, who gave no quarter to the race leader in his efforts to separate Hill from a spot in the points. In the race's closing laps, Irvine attacked Senna again, aggressively unlapping himself in the run to the checkered flag. Afterwards, Mika Hakkinen rejoiced in his third-place finish, while Senna used the cool-down lap to do anything but. He later confronted Irvine in the pits and punctuated their conversation with a punch. Officials have ordered both men to a hearing in December at which Senna could be slapped with a suspension. Nevertheless, today marks the end of an era. With more, here's Derek Daly.
1988 saw the debut of what many people consider to be a true super team, with Senna and Prost paired together at McLaren. However, a bitter rivalry soon erupted, and the words of friendship have been few and far between ever since. In '89, with the championship on the line, they blamed each other for this chicane incident. Prost became the champion. The following year, also in Japan, Prost needed to win to try and take the championship, but Senna took him out in this first lap crash. Senna later admitted he did it deliberately, and he was champion. Last week in Japan, Senna was superb, soundly beating Prost and everyone else to the delight of the Japanese Brazilians. But this year, Prost has taken most of the headlines. But for next year, Senna has taken Prost's drive.
Today, the two old rivals meet for the last time in a Grand Prix race. We'll be back with more from Australia in just a moment. This ESPN Speed World presentation is brought to you by Volvo. Volvo wants you to drive safely. By Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car. And by Budweiser, the king of beers, who reminds you, friends know when to say when. Overhead, you see the Victoria Park horse track extensively modified for Grand Prix racing as final preparations are made for the last race of the '93 season. Let's check out the Yamaha starting grid. On the pole for the first time this year, breaking a 24-race Williams pole streak, Ayrton Senna of Brazil in his last race for the McLaren Ford team. Next to him, Alain Prost, and the Williams Renault starts his 199th Grand Prix. Row 2 will be Damon Hill in the second Williams, next to Michael Schumacher of Germany in the Benetton Ford with four-wheel steering. On row 3, Mika Hakkinen in the second McLaren, next to the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger, who crashed on Friday. Row 4, Jean Alesi in the second Ferrari, who also had a crash on Saturday, and Martin Brundle in the Ligier. On row 5, Riccardo Patrese in the Benetton Ford, next to the footwork Mugen Honda of Aguri Suzuki of Japan. Row 6 will be Karl Wendlinger and J.J. Leito of the Sauber team, Leito in his final appearance for Sauber. On row 7, Rubens Barrichello of Brazil with the Jordan Hart fighting a case of food poisoning this weekend. Next to him, the Ligier of Mark Blundell of Great Britain. Row 8 will be Andrea De Cesaris in the Tyrrell, next to Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi Ford. Row 9, Derek Warwick of Great Britain, who was out on Friday with a case of bronchitis. Next to him, Ukio Katayama of Japan, who has signed a new contract this weekend. He is in the Tyrrell. On row 10 will be Eddie Irvine at the center of the controversy in Japan 2 weeks ago for Jordan. Next to him, Johnny Herbert of Great Britain in the Lotus Ford. On row 11 will be Eric Comas of France in the Larousse Lamborghini, next to the Minardi Ford of countryman Jean-Marc Gagnon. Pedro Lamy and Toshio Suzuki of Japan will start on row 12. Here's a look at our conditions at race time. A warm 66 degrees, a light breeze, cloudy, and rain is always a threat here on the streets of Adelaide. A look at the points coming in. Alain Prost, of course, the world champion, but look at the battle for second. Damon Hill trying to hold off Ayrton Senna, just 2 points between them. Now let's take a look at the track here in Adelaide. Derek?
Fastest street racing track used by Formula One cars today. One of the most enjoyable weekends of the year, also here in Adelaide. Typically lined by concrete with 2 switchback chicanes. The long back straight, called the Brabham Straight, speeds of 190 miles an hour down to the slowest corner on the racetrack, the prime overtaking spot. Last corner on the track, well, that was where Mansell and Senna crashed last year.
Hardly a race goes down here in Adelaide without some kind of controversy. Now, you saw Martin Brundle taking the Ligier to the back of the field, right there between the 2 rows of cars. What a shot he has got at this green light. There is the green flag. We are under starter's orders. Prost on the left, Senna on the right. A chicane coming up. The cars will bunch up. It should be something to watch. Turn up the sound. Last green light of the season. Now we have yellow flags at mid-pack. Yellow flags, you see them on the left. They were on the right. Now they've been furled on the right. There is Gerhard Berger in a Ferrari. He's been picked out by our host broadcasters from Australia.
And this is purely a safety measure. If they feel that somebody cannot get off the line here, they will delay the start. Red flag it. You got to come back out 10 to the cars because they overheat so quickly.
There's Ukio Katayama's machine. Well, while the crews come out to get everybody reset for the start, let's take a look at the milestones for Alain Prost as he wraps up a 13-year Formula One career, only 12 of them actually racing after he was fired by Ferrari. At Argentina in 1980, driving for McLaren was his Formula One debut. He actually scored points in that race with a 6th place. France in 1981, his first victory for the factory Renault team. 1985, his first championship, when these cars were powered by turbocharged engines with more than 1,000 horsepower. In Portugal in 1987, he surpassed Jackie Stewart's all-time record with his 28th victory. This year at Silverstone for the Grand Prix of Great Britain, his 50th victory. Today, his final Grand Prix. And a shot at his 52nd Formula One win. 199 starts, 33 poles, a shot at that 52nd win today. 4 championships. Only Juan Manuel Fangio of Argentina has more with 5. Total points, 792.5. A victory today would take him over 800. By comparison, Ayrton Senna is the only man close with barely 600 points. Now there's Martin Brundle. He has been pushed to his regular starting position now. We will take 1 lap off the total race distance of 81. They will take another slow formation lap, and then we should have the start.
Well, what a stroke of luck for Martin Brundle. They actually canceled that start, so it's not officially a start. Therefore, when they start again, he is allowed back into his original position.
There you see Carl Wendlinger being attended to by the Sauber team. We have time for a quick timeout, and we will take it. We'll be back for the delayed green light at the Grand Prix of Australia. Stay with us. Back in Adelaide, Australia, you see the field making its way around on the second formation lap of the Grand Prix of Australia. Ukio Katayama's Tyrrell failed to start at the first attempt, or at least stalled on the grid after the first formation lap. He has now been moved to the back of the starting grid, and we will attempt to get the race underway. A look at the winners during the 1993 season. Alain Prost, the leading winner with 7 victories. Ayrton Senna with 4. Damon Hill with a hat trick. And Michael Schumacher with 1 victory, that coming in Portugal. We may see our 5th winner of the day here in Adelaide. There is Eddie Irvine, the Northern Irishman who was at the center of the big storm with Senna following the Japanese Grand Prix. This weekend, Senna admitted he should not have punched Irvine, but both men will have to talk to the sanctioning body in December, and there may be punishments coming down. All of that, however, is in the future. We are now ready to attempt to start the Grand Prix of Australia. For the second time, we have another yellow flag. There's Katayama in the Tyrrell. Now we have yellows all up and down the left side. You saw Damon Hill waving his arms in the air as though they were cramping. No word yet as to who it is that has caused the problem again. Now there is Eddie Irvine. Channel 9 television from Australia apparently thinks Eddie might have something to do with this.
And we said it earlier, it is purely a safety measure. We have seen racing drivers killed when cars stall on the line. You can see the Jordan there. Something has happened. He was ahead of his starting position. That is probably why the yellow flagged him. You can see it clearly there. Obviously, he may not get it in reverse gear. But remember, it is for safety reasons we have seen drivers killed when cars stall on the line.
Well, somebody else will have to go to the back of the pack, it would appear, and wear the dunce cap as we get set for our 3rd attempt to try to start the 16th and final round of the 1993 Formula One season. This should be interesting. Back at Adelaide, Australia, the fastest temporary or street circuit in all of motor racing. And the field for the Grand Prix of Australia has completed the 2 slowest laps in the history of this race. We have had 2 aborted starts. The first one when Ukio Katayama's Tyrrell stalled on the grid. The second when Eddie Irvine's Jordan stalled. We have now completed our 3rd formation lap. There is always something going on here in Adelaide. You are riding on board with Michael Schumacher. Here comes the field around to grid positions for the 3rd and hopefully the final time.
And Ken Tyrrell was absolutely furious with the stewards because they did not allow Katayama to get his position back on the grid like they did with Martin Brundle. So Eddie Irvine and Katayama are still on the back of this grid.
So the grid has been reformed, but on the front row, we now have the green flag. Prost on the left, Senna on the right. Let's see how we do. Red light. Away. To the center of the track they go. Big chicane coming up. From the curb, you saw the cars fighting their way through. Looks like Pedro Lamy has gotten it wrong end forwards.
And you saw that absolutely live as it happened. A crash almost took that camera out that's mounted in the curbs at that first chicane that crashed there last year. It's a funnel effect, but Pedro Lamy in the Castrol Loctite Lotus gets no further than chicane number 1.
But the race is underway. Ayrton Senna, as you take another look at the start, Prost diving for the middle of the track. Damon Hill closing up behind Senna.
Look at the squeeze job on the Ferrari, about 5 or 6 cars back. See how tight that is. Now here's the crash. Here's the crash. It was the Tyrrell of Katayama comes up. The Lotus looked as if he was minding his own business, and he was actually attacked from the right-hand side. Here it is again, top of your picture.
It looks like Lamy had it straightened up. He might have gotten a nudge from Eric Comas going out the bottom of your screen in the LaRousse Lamborghini. Nevertheless, Lamy is our first retirement. Ayrton Senna leads the first lap at racing speeds across the start-finish line. Yellow flags everywhere because they were not able to move Lamy's car clearly.
Senna was the fastest man in the morning warm-up. Second fastest was Schumacher. So the V8 Ford engine cars, the lighter, more nimble cars, are faster around this very tight and twisty street circuit in Adelaide.
In fact, both Damon Hill and Alain Prost were very forthright about it. They say McLaren and the rest of the competition have caught us. We have no advantage here. They were 5th and 7th in the morning warm-up. Hill faster than Prost.
How things change in racing. The Williams domination has been so dominant, so incredible this year and last year. Now to see a McLaren in dry conditions lead these races and lead them strongly is something we have not seen for a long, long time. Michael Schumacher closes up behind Damon Hill. Remember Schumacher? The four-wheel steering he enjoys on that car. Wasn't sure that it was an advantage when he ran it on Friday. By the time Saturday came, said yes, it's definitely better. They've spent a lot of money developing it. However, it is banned for next season.
Let's take one more look at that crash involving Pedro Lamy. From the curb cam,
De Cesaris gets away with it, but Katayama came down the inside on the grass. He stuck a wheel underneath Lamy, and he took Lamy then forced one of the Jordan cars to just sail over the top of that curve also. Long way to come just to do, well, they've already done 2 laps, slow laps, but in racing conditions, a long way to come just to get to the first chicane.
In the terraces section, East Terrace, carving around the blocks. These, of course, are workaday streets in Adelaide, Australia. The course was repaved last year to accommodate this race. Sharp right-hander here, very high speed, and then on to De Quetteville Terrace, excuse me, renamed Brabham Straightaway on race weekend.
Only place they use 6th gear. Heavy braking all the way down to the slowest corner on the racetrack. In fact, this may be the slowest corner in Formula One, all the way down to 25 miles an hour. On board with Michael Schumacher. Here's the blast down to the last corner where Senna took Mansell out last year. It's a blast down here. Second slowest corner on the racetrack. Coming up here, 42 miles an hour in qualifying.
Pit entry on the right. Let's listen as Michael Schumacher puts the car through its paces. Very hard on transmissions, brakes, and engines. From above, you watch them working the terrace section. Lots of 90-degree corners.
Chasing Damon Hill very hard to overtake a Williams. That Renault V10 horsepower. Look at this. Schumacher, under braking, goes wide, way out of the racing groove. And look, he loses what? 5 or 6 car lengths to Damon Hill. A fraction of a mistake cost you so much in this day and age. Look at Senna's lead, increasing over Alain Prost, who is driving the spare car.
Michael Schumacher, a winner this year at Portugal with those spare barn doors just ahead of the air inlets. Into Victoria Park he goes. We'll be back to Adelaide in just a moment. Back at Adelaide, Australia, just touching 6th gear, RPMs reaching for 15,000, 100% throttle. The Ford Benetton telemetry being used by Australian Channel 9 to provide the world feed of today's Grand Prix of Australia. Entering Victoria Park now. This is a turf horse racing facility, and all that you see in this area, including the racetrack itself, is temporary. The track here in Australia is covered when this race is over, and the facility is returned to a horse race track. All of the buildings, the pits, the control towers, all of the fencing all come down. Out of the park now, onto the surface streets of Adelaide. There is Ayrton Senna, the race leader, working lap number 7. Alain Prost in 2nd place, who says he would love to go out with a victory in his 199th and final Grand Prix appearance, but he says it doesn't matter all that much if he doesn't. Right behind him, the 0 Williams Renault of Damon Hill, just beginning his Grand Prix career at the age of 33. Next year, he will be paired with Ayrton Senna in the Williams Renault team. Senna also 33. He began his Grand Prix career at the age of 23 when Damon Hill says, "I wasn't even thinking of racing cars."
Everybody here is on the softer D compound Goodyear tires. We expect pit stops between lap 30 to 35. We do expect stops. Goodyear actually brought another softer compound here for evaluation purposes. Nobody's allowed to use that in the race. They are all on the softest compound D that Goodyear would allow them to run.
There's a look at Mika Hakkinen in his 32nd Grand Prix appearance. He has accomplished so much in that little space of time. On the other hand, Damon Hill has driven about half as many races and won 3. Mika Hakkinen has not won.
Mika was disappointed with his qualifying position, only qualified 5th. Simply said, he drove too hard, tried too hard to try and match the pace of Ayrton Senna, who has been quicker than him all weekend here, faster in relative terms than Senna has been with Mika Hakkinen for the last couple of races. So Mika Hakkinen driving way too hard, and sometimes it does slow you down. Look at him drive up over the curbs in the McLaren.
There's Pierluigi Martini of Italy in the Minardi. He's obviously lost the fire.
You can see the double rear wings on the Martini, fashioned by the Footwork team. In fact, the Williams team and Ferrari tried the double rear wings here in practice, but for the race, they think they need that extra speed down this long 185-mile-an-hour back straight.
Looks like Martini made the pit entrance. Meanwhile, the race goes on. Minardi not sure who their drivers will be next year. They say Fittipaldi, Christian Fittipaldi, will be in the fold as you look at Michael Schumacher. But Fittipaldi says no, he's discussing options with several teams. Martini wants to discuss a drive with Minardi for next year. But right now, those 2 seats are basically open for 94.
Gerhard Berger, you mentioned earlier a big crash here Friday. Mika Hakkinen is chasing him.
Through the chicane goes Hakkinen. Pedro Lami's car now well out of the way.
Hakkinen, of course, another driver who does not know who his teammate will be next year. Lots of rumors flying around here. McLaren may go for a young star, may go. They've been testing some of the bright up-and-coming stars of Formula 3. Patrese has been mentioned because of his vast experience, because they feel the team maybe needs some experience. So Patrese hopeful he may get in there. Also, Blondell is out of Ligier. He's been a past test driver for McLaren. He is hoping and praying he gets the phone call from Ron Dennis.
Riding along with Mika Hakkinen on the Brabham Straight. Lots of talk in Adelaide this weekend. Speaking of Brabham, Sir Jack Brabham, a three-time world champion, could be back in Formula One next year. He is hunting sponsors to join with the new Simtech racing team, for whom his son David will drive next year. The car, designed by 27-year-old design whiz Nick Wirth, may be powered by a Ford engine, and it is a very unique design. The front suspension parts are raised up to get them out of the airflow. It should be a very unique design, and we look forward to seeing it next year. Alain Prost, as you saw, has taken fast lap as Mika Hakkinen makes his way around in 6th place. There's Ayrton Senna, the race leader.
This McLaren has been developed quite well as this season has gone on. One of the biggest things that they found made this car more stable was the power brakes. Senna said it's physically easier to drive, and he does believe it makes his car faster. That was one of the options that Mika Hakkinen spent most of the season developing, and now, of course, they use it all the time.
You saw the top 6, ending with Hakkinen. Behind him, Alesi, Brundle, Suzuki, Wendlinger, Leto, Patrese, Blundell, Johnny Herbert, Derek Warwick, Andrea De Cesaris, Rubens Barrichello, Eric Comas, Eddie Irvine, Ukio Katayama, Jean-Marc Gagnon, and Toshio Suzuki. At this point, Pierluigi Martini is still in the pits.
And his problem is, in fact, gearbox. We don't know yet whether it's terminal, but gearbox is the reason that has slowed him considerably at the moment.
Alain Prost, winding up his Grand Prix career. What more can you say about the professor? 12 years of hard racing, an extraordinary number of achievements, 4 world championships. Said coming into the weekend that he is 5 or 10% uncertain, you might say, whether he will actually stay out of Formula One. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we return to the streets of Adelaide, Australia. Located between the Gulf of St. Vincent and the Mount Lofty Range in South Australia, Adelaide is the 4th largest city in the country, behind Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Of course, the entirety of Australia takes 17 million people, about the size of the city of New York, and scatters them over an area of some 3 million square miles, about the size of the continental United States. There is Ayrton Senna. A moment ago, you saw the Jordan of Eddie Irvine in the pits. And we'll show you why he's there in just a moment as you take a look at the top 6, the men in the points-paying positions here after 12 laps at the Grand Prix of Australia. See the time run thus far and the intervals to those following. Race leader Ayrton Senna of Brazil. Senna having it all his way in his final race for the McLaren team after 6 seasons. Now let's take a look at what happened to Eddie Irvine, with whom Senna had his contretemps in Japan 2 weeks ago. Watch the bottom of your screen.
And this is the same place that Ayrton Senna crashed a couple of years ago. Exactly the same tire wall, but Eddie Irvine luckily kept that Jordan Hart running. Selected reverse, did get back to the pit lane, but it wasn't a simple tire change. There, in fact, was something else broken on the car that we couldn't see from here.
Your basic massive understeer. These being normal daily streets that are used by cars and trucks, getting cars set up perfectly for this kind of a surface with its bumps and its drainage can be very difficult indeed. We've had a multitude of spins this weekend, several large crashes. Both Ferraris have been in the walls. Now let's take a look at what just happened to one of the Tyrrells. This is Ukio Katayama, it would appear, straight off at one of the corners. Ooh, and hard into the concrete.
See the right front suspension? Looks like, I think he broke the right side, and then that pushed him across out of the camera shot into the left side guardrail. So Katayama involved in, we think, 3 different crashes, and we're only 13 or 14 laps into this race.
Well, it looked like that one might have put paid to Katayama's hopes.
He's lucky he signed his contract before this race started, because in fact he has signed a new Tyrrell contract to stay with Uncle Ken next season.
Now you're riding along with Damon Hill, presently in 3rd place. If the race were to end right now, he would give up 2nd place in the Drivers' Championship to Ayrton Senna, who leads, riding on board with Michael Schumacher now. Derek, let me ask you, how important is it to either Senna or Damon Hill to finish 2nd to Alain Prost for the title?
In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever because whoever remembers who was second. However, from a personal standpoint, I think it's very important for Damon Hill because being his first full season of Formula One, I think it's a personal thing rather than something that will be important in the years down the road in the grand scheme of things.
And now, Michael...
Here's something else, Bob. Look how long it has taken Schumacher to make up for that one slight mistake that he made on lap 5. It's taken him almost 7 or 8 laps to claw his way back up to Damon Hill again.
Michael Schumacher's thumb comes off that blue button on the steering wheel that changes the aerodynamic profile of the car.
One of the things that will disappear next year because all these electronic gizmos that in effect help the driver perform his duties, and Schumacher's the first man into the pit lane.
Schumacher opting to take new rubber on rather than trying to get around Damon Hill with the old rubber. Let's time the pit stop. Good quick stop.
Look at that. To my mind, one of the scariest times in Grand Prix racing when these cars come down the pit lane at over 100 miles an hour with literally hundreds of people standing around watching what goes on, and very, very few people ever get injured.
Well, the focus of the danger next year, since you mentioned next year's rules, will be that teams will be refueling in Formula One. And all of that chaos in the pits will go on while teams are pumping volatile fuel into the race cars.
I wonder how many will elect to actually refuel, because they say it will be gravity-fed, non-pressurized. That means it will take a long time to put fuel into these cars, certainly more than that 4.8 seconds we just saw there.
Let's take another look at that pit stop from the perspective of Michael Schumacher's onboard camera. Now take a look at the scenery.
There is a minimum 15 to 20 people per team all the way down the right side. Now the scary thing is when he gets the new tires on, because they're not as warm as he's used to. Look, little tunnel area to get out between the human bodies, and away he goes again.
Damon Hill going underneath the slower car in the terrace section. Notice no runoff to speak of on these streets of Adelaide, Australia. Concrete walls all around.
First time Damon Hill has raced here. He was here last year as a spectator. He spun off on Friday. In fact, he spun off in qualifying on Saturday, having set the fastest qualifying time of Saturday. It wasn't quick enough to displace Alain Prost or Ayrton Senna from the front row, but he was the fastest man in qualifying yesterday afternoon in that hotter, much hotter, and much more slippery qualifying session.
21 minutes and 4 seconds into the race. Ayrton Senna leads Alain Prost by 4.2 seconds. We'll be back with more of the Grand Prix of Australia in just a moment. Back in Adelaide, Australia, Alain Prost running second in the Grand Prix of Australia gets around the slower car of Andrea De Cesaris, who spent the weekend fighting an ear infection that has affected his balance, which I'm sure Pit Wags would say is very difficult to notice in the way Andrea De Cesaris drives. Certainly, he offered no problem there for Prost. There is race leader Ayrton Senna, who started a few moments ago with a 3+ second lead over Alain Prost. It is now well under that, getting down to 2 seconds as Prost closes in.
The master of saving tires is Alain Prost. We have seen that many times. So as this race unfolds, that is what we will watch. Now, interestingly enough, the fastest lap of the race at this point has been set by Michael Schumacher. Oh, Michael Schumacher. We just put the death spell on him.
This is not the fastest lap of the race. Obviously, problems for Michael Schumacher, who pitted for tires, came out and set fast lap, and something has obviously gone terminally wrong.
And that is a shame, because what he tried to do, look at the smoke coming out of the left, that looks like the left wheel. What he tried to do, he had caught Damon Hill. He thought he was faster, so instead of staying behind Damon and not able to make the pass, he was first into the pits, got the fresh tire, set fastest lap of the race. That was going to be his ticket to a rostrum finish. And now it is all up in smoke.
Since his victory in Portugal, Michael Schumacher has not had an easy run of it. An accident in Japan and now a car failure here in Australia. Race leader Ayrton Senna comes flashing by in the red and white of the McLaren, and here comes Alain Prost in the blue, yellow, and white Williams Renault.
Lots of controversy this weekend between Senna, particularly with Senna over the Irvine problem, and Alain Prost. Prost said he would like to finish his career on a happy note with Ayrton Senna. Senna has been invited, let's say, to become friends with Prost. He's unwilling to do it. He wants to stay that cold distance from Alain Prost. He said, maybe after the race, I might consider doing something. The rivalry continues. However, Prost is going to back out and wants no more of it. Prost has said 80% of his decision to stop Formula One was made because of the politics of the sport.
Saw that radar gun just above the braking marker on the De Quetteville Terrace / Brabham Straight. Here is Gerhard Berger hard at work in the Ferrari. Now, Ferrari is one of the few teams in Formula One that has their driver lineup for 1994 in place. Taking a look at the teams, Williams, of course, will have Ayrton Senna and Damon Hill. McLaren has Mika Hakkinen, and who knows in the second car. Benetton will have Michael Schumacher, but an empty seat next to him. Ferrari with Alesi and Berger. Sauber will have Wendlinger and Heinz-Harald Frentzen of Germany. Lotus will have Johnny Herbert and Pedro Lamy. The rest of the teams, Tyrrell, Pacific, Simtek, Jordan, the new Simtek and Pacific teams have one driver signed up. Among these drivers looking for rides in 1994, Riccardo Patrese trying to extend his all-time record for Grand Prix participations. J.J. Leto is out at Sauber. Andre De Cesaris, Derek Warwick, Philippe Ayot, Martin Brundle, Mark Blundell. Whoa, and I have a big spin on the racetrack. There you see Jean-Marc Gounon, the Formula 3000 runner from France, who took that Minardi over one of the curbs in a big spin, but he didn't hit anything. And now, with heart well aflutter, I'm sure, he's back out on the straightaway. Into the pits comes Damon Hill.
So lap 22 sees Damon Hill in the pits. Let's watch how quick it is. Remember, 4.8 was Schumacher. Not as good. Not as good. 1.5 seconds slower than Michael Schumacher's stop. However, it was still safe. There's Hakkinen right behind him.
And this is for position now. If Hakkinen can get around him, this is for third place. Now you see Gerhard Berger making his first stop. We expect lots of stops today using that very soft D compound Goodyear tire. These drivers will be going through them like donuts.
See that dust? That's brake dust from the carbon fiber brakes that gets all over the rear of the car. And when he accelerates away, just knocks it all off, blows it into the airstream, and away he goes.
Carl Wendlinger, J.J. Leto, and Riccardo Patrese coming up from behind means that Gerhard Berger has dropped from 5th when he pitted back to 8th place. Ayrton Senna flashes across the start-finish line with Eric Komas just ahead in the Ligier. I take that best, Toshio Suzuki of Japan in his second Grand Prix start at the age of 38.
Senna got infuriated with some of the members of the media during interviews this weekend because they tried to push him to make a statement about the Eddie Irvine problem in Suzuka. He tried to avoid it. He wouldn't talk about it. He stayed quietly to himself. Eventually, he said there was no justification for what he did. He should not have punched Eddie Irvine, and he will have to answer for that to the FIA World Council in December.
He was also very critical of the press coverage of the whole affair, saying that television never showed all of the problems he had on the racetrack with Irvine, but nevertheless, he admitted he should not have clocked him. We'll be back with more from Adelaide, Australia in just a moment. Stay with us. Back in Adelaide, race leader Ayrton Senna making a stop for tires, a pretty quick one at 5.3 seconds. Meanwhile, Mika Hakkinen has gotten around Damon Hill and into third place.
Good stop for Ayrton Senna. Schumacher still leads on the pit stop, 4.8, but 5.3 is good even by McLaren standards.
Of course, Michael Schumacher is now out of the race. Ayrton Senna having to take this lap a little bit gingerly as a result of the new tires. Now there is Damon Hill trying to get his place back from Mika Hakkinen. Very close.
Risky move. Remember, Damon Hill knows that Hakkinen has not stopped, and he knows he will stop, so he better not stick his nose where he doesn't need to have it, because Hakkinen will chop it off, and then Hill will be the one that's sorry. Hakkinen, I'm sure, will stop very shortly.
Wearing the blue and white of his native Finland on the helmet, the number 7 that was originally started this year by Michael Andretti, now being driven by Mika Hakkinen with a great deal of flash. And Formula One is definitely going to need that in 1994 with Alain Prost out of the championship. Nigel Mansell long gone. Once again, Hill looks under Hakkinen in the very tight right-hand hairpin.
If he's not more decisive, he will lose those front wings. We saw Mansell get his front wings chopped off with Nelson Piquet several years back, right in that position there. But Mika Hakkinen will chop his nose off if he gets the chance. Look at this, locks up the right front. He needs tires. Damon Hill surely can see that, surely will know that. Here he goes, though, V10 power.
Ooh, coming down to the chicane. Yes, Damon Hill will take him going into the left-hander. Now, Ayrton Senna's pit stop means that Alain Prost is now the race leader, but Prost has not stopped. It is Prost, Senna, then this battle, Hill and Hakkinen, followed by Jean Alesi and Aguri Suzuki, who has yet to stop. He is now up in the points.
Well, Hakkinen can now measure just how much slower he is than Damon Hill, knowing that Damon Hill made that tire stop. That will help Mika Hakkinen make his decision. Remember, ultimately, it's the driver's decision when you stop, and the McLaren pit is ready and waiting for their number 2 man.
Here is a replay of Derek Warwick bounding over those high international curbs and almost taking the footwork to the wall.
Oh, Derek had a lot of trouble, missed the complete sessions here on Friday with that stomach bug that he had. Was it bronchitis?
Yeah.
Bronchitis he ended up having, they said. But came back on Saturday. In fact, Christian Fittipaldi is here walking around enjoying the weekend. He was fitted to the footwork car in case Derek Warwick was not able to drive.
Speaking of enjoying the weekend, one of the key features of every Australian Grand Prix here in Adelaide is a party as you watch Mika Hakkinen coming in. The star performer this year is Tina Turner, so they are really going to light up the night here in Adelaide once this race is concluded. Good pit stop for Hakkinen.
Reasonably good by Michael Schumacher standards. Remember, 4.8. A second means a lot when you travel at 150 miles an hour down the back straight.
You saw Jean Alesi bringing the Ferrari back out of the pits. Mika Hakkinen now running back in 4th spot, unofficially, as we now have 26 laps complete, quickly approaching the halfway point in this race.
Mika Hakkinen said that physically this is one of the most tiring races he has ever raced in. He thought the rear tires were going to have the hardest time on the cars, and traction control was absolutely going to earn its worth here this weekend in Adelaide. Of course, traction control is another one of those electronic gizmos that will be banned for next season.
You see Riccardo Patrese about to be lapped by Alain Prost. Patrese running 12th overall, last car on the lead lap. Patrese has pitted, Prost has not. We expect him within 2 laps. I mentioned that this is a big party weekend here in Adelaide, but this race is going down under something of a cloud. Among the various promotions for this race was a sprint car event in a parking lot around a shopping center in the town of Norlunga, a southern suburb of Adelaide. In that race, one of those sprint cars flew off, went through a fence and into a crowd, injuring 10 people, 1 critically. I would imagine that's the last time they'll be doing that in connection with this race. Making big headlines this weekend also is the fact that officials in Melbourne, Australia have said that when the contract for this Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide is up in 1996, they want to bid for it.
So Prost decides not to stop. They're ready in the Williams pit for Alain Prost to take that number 2 car into the pit lane. He decides it's not time yet. But remember, Senna is on new tires. That will be Prost's gauge. If Senna begins to run away, then Prost will be forced to stop. Surely, with Patrese either holding him up or realizing he's not able to get by Patrese, that's going to make him decide he needs to get back to the pit lane.
Right now, Senna trails Alain Prost by 7.5 seconds. Damon Hill runs 26 seconds behind the leader. We'll be back in just a moment. Back in Adelaide, Australia, Alain Prost, the race leader, is in the pits. In the McLaren pit, Mika Hakkinen is stopped, and they are working on the left rear of the car. A long stop for the Williams crew. Alain Prost has not had good pit stops, generally speaking, this year.
And you could see the rear jackman was not able to get that manual jack under the rear wing on the first try. In fact, he made 3 attempts before he got it right. And remember, they couldn't take the wheels off until the car was actually up in the air. That's probably what cost that precious 2 seconds.
The race leader is now Ayrton Senna, and as you can see, out of sight on the short vista available to Alain Prost at this point. We'll see when they get on to Dequetteville Terrace whether Alain Prost is within sight of the leader. This is Rundle Road, one of the main shopping thoroughfares in Adelaide. Whoops, here is Hakkinen. Will he come back out of the pits?
Slowly, very slowly, on the way back in again. So he is having all sorts of trouble here. The right rear was what they worked on, and then now it's the left rear. Something very, very serious with Hakkinen.
The engine is still running, however. Big problems now for Hakkinen. Looking at the dashboard.
What a bright future he has to look forward to with one of the best teams in Formula One. They believe he is a potential star of the future. Miles and miles and miles of testing under his belt, away from the public eye. And then he came out in Portugal, and he was a big star, although he did have a crash.
And while Hakkinen sits, let's take another look at Alain Prost's pit stop.
Watch the man with the rear jack. He runs around, and he misses. There's the first miss. There's the second one. There's the third one. It was 2.7 seconds before he actually got the rear of that car into the air. That was very, very costly.
Ayrton Senna now leads the race, and he in turn has a 7.5 second gap on Alain Prost. So with Prost's pit stop, there was a full 15-second swing in the running order. Aguri Suzuki moves up into 5th place as Mika Hakkinen drops out, and Gerhard Berger follows him up. I don't believe Suzuki has made his pit stop, however. We'll see how quickly the footwork team can get him back out.
You know, you mentioned Aguri Suzuki. That footwork team, since they got the benefit of the TAG Active Ride suspension, has actually run very, very well. That is the Mugen Honda V10. We watch Mika Hakkinen. His day looks as if it may be over. They push it back into the garage when it's a fairly terminal problem. But I was mentioning the footwork car. They're uncertain as to who will drive the car, or in fact who will sponsor that car for next year. But they've done a fairly good job. They were the fastest cars down the straight in the morning's warm-up.
Well, as there you saw, the gap between Senna in first and Prost in second, now almost 15 seconds. I have no idea how it expanded so quickly, unless Alain Prost is having some kind of a problem. That is Mark Blundell in the blue Ligier. There goes Derek Warwick in the footwork. Now here comes Alain Prost. No obvious signs of problems.
He spent a long time behind Riccardo Patrese. Probably 2 or 3 laps too long he stayed out. That allowed Senna, who was on the fresh tires, running second at the time, to close up that gap. Prost probably didn't know that Senna was eating into that lead at the time, and that is very costly. And then, of course, he lost another couple of seconds during that poor pit stop.
Mika Hakkinen joins the cars on the sideline. Pierluigi Martini is out, as are Johnny Herbert, Eddie Irvine, Ukio Katayama, and Michael Schumacher, as well as Pedro Lamy. Stay with us for more from Australia. at Adelaide, Australia, riding along with Damon Hill in third place at the Grand Prix of Australia. At this point, he has given up second place in the Drivers' Championship to race leader Ayrton Senna, but this race has not yet reached the halfway mark. Now, moments ago, Gerhard Berger, with whom you ride, passed Aguri Suzuki there on the left for fifth place.
And almost looked like desperation. He lunges down the inside. This is down at the hairpin, just about squeezes through, but Berger in the Ferrari does take away that fifth place from Suzuki.
Gerhard Berger and Alain Prost hoping to become the first three-time winner of this race. There is Derek Warwick now coming under fire from Damon Hill. Hill trying to put a lap on Warwick, who runs in 12th place.
Here we go, inside with Damon Hill, two V10 engines. That footwork car was very fast in the morning warm-up, but you can see Warwick, I think, backed out of it and let Damon Hill go away. That is the way for an experienced driver to get out of the throttle a little bit early, let the faster car through, and not lose too much time yourself. That's what Senna wanted Eddie Irvine to do last weekend, or 2 weeks ago in Japan. Just stay behind him and let him get through and get on his way.
Ayrton Senna with a 13-second lead over Alain Prost. Damon Hill third, Jean Alesi fourth, Gerhard Berger fifth, Aguri Suzuki sixth. Behind them, Martin Brundle, Carl Wendlinger, J.J. Leto, and Ricardo Patrese round out the top 10. Mark Blundell, Derek Warwick, Rubens Barrichello, Eric Comas, Andrea De Cesaris, Jean-Marc Gounon, Toshio Suzuki. 17 cars remain of the 24 starters.
That's J.J. Leto now that Senna is moving up to put a lap on. Leto's had a good weekend, actually. Been right on the pace here with his teammate. Wendlinger waves his arm at Senna, moves out of the way, lets him through. J.J. Leto, of course, will not be in that seat next year. Rumor has it he may go to Jordan or he may go to Tyrrell. We won't know for a while yet. Look at Prost down the inside of Blundell. There's Damon Hill right behind him.
Damon Hill closing up on his teammate for second place. Hill with nothing to lose at this point. If Alain Prost truly is retiring, there are no team orders in effect here today, we can assume. I mentioned earlier, Alain Prost said earlier this week that there was a 5 to 10% chance, as he estimated it, that he might come back to Formula One. But our chief statistician, Danny Knutson, who writes widely on Formula One subjects, says there's nothing to it.
Yes, I don't know what that was meant to mean, because he qualified the statement by saying, but I certainly won't race in the opening race of 1994. We know Ron Dennis from McLaren did speak to Prost to see could he entice him to lead the McLaren team, but it became very confusing. I don't believe Prost will come back next year.
Well, there have been lots of wild stories this weekend. The French press also reported that Alain Prost saved an airliner with 300 people on board as you watch Damon Hill fighting the steering wheel. Here from Channel 9 is a replay of Jean-Marc Gounon going around again. That's the second major incident that we've seen today from Gounon.
They never did move Michael Schumacher's car. You see that still on the same place that he stalled or pulled off on. Earlier on, they deemed it not to be in a dangerous position. Bob, you mentioned team orders earlier on. Damon Hill actually said he would have to talk to Frank Williams to see would there be team orders in this race, seeing as Prost is leaving and the championship is over. I don't think there is team orders, and Hill is clearly faster than Prost. And if Hill thinks he's faster and can attack Senna, I think he'll make a big move here if he can get close enough.
Now, the Williams team has proven time and again that they have a fairly short memory when it comes to former drivers, and Alain Prost is a soon-to-be former Williams driver, despite his world championship with the team this year. Now, this is a race car that just about anybody can drive. All you have to do is ask, right, Derek?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but in fact, it will have a major driver change next year in Ayrton Senna, but in fact, I myself will get to drive this car probably before Ayrton Senna gets his hands on it. I simply asked Frank at the French Grand Prix at the end of the year, could I in fact drive this car, being technically the most advanced racing car ever built. I thought I hadn't driven one of these for 11 years. Wouldn't it be nice before they packed them away and never see them again on the racetrack in anger to actually drive it? I will go to Paul Ricard on November 29th. have a test, and you will be able to see it on Speed Week.
That's right. Watch ESPN Speed Week. Of course, I'm teasing Derek Daly, who not only will test Alain Prost's Williams-Renault, he will also test Nigel Mansell's IndyCar championship-winning Lola Ford. So keep your eyes on ESPN Speed Week and see how our man in the open-wheeled series does. I can't wait myself. I was going to ask, but I'm way too tall. I couldn't have fit in the car.
And you will read about it in some very select magazines.
Andrea De Cesaris comes under fire now from the Williams-Renault duo. De Cesaris, one of the many drivers looking for a drive in 1994. The reason that we keep talking about the driver lineup for next year is that Formula One rules require that the teams announce their driver nominations a week following today's race. A week from now, they have to submit drivers for 1994, and it is going to be a very busy week for some teams.
And that's a very strange rule to me. I mean, don't tell me that a lot of these teams do not continue negotiations with potential sponsors all the way through the winter. I think that's a very difficult criteria to fulfill for these Formula One team managers and owners.
On to the pit straight comes Ayrton Senna with Aguri Suzuki just behind, having been put a lap down. 6 cars. The points-paying positions are the only unlapped machines in the race.
Such a successful combination here Ayrton Senna has had under Ron Dennis at McLaren. 3 World Championships, 62 pole positions he has had in his career, a staggering number. The amazing thing is, though, Alain Prost has had so many more fastest laps in the race than Ayrton Senna, when Senna is considered the most gifted and fastest driver in Formula One.
Toshio Suzuki in the yellow and blue LaRousse, being passed by Alain Prost. Damon Hill will follow. The thing that struck me about Senna's pole for this race, it is the first for a Ford Cosworth engine since Keke Rosberg took the pole for the Grand Prix of Brazil back in 1983. Back at the Grand Prix of Australia, Damon Hill pits from 3rd place for new rubber, hopefully his last stop of the race, but it comes just past the halfway mark, and that raises lots of questions as he checks back in. As Hill makes his way around, let's check in with our Suzuki motorcycle race recap. The race leader is Ayrton Senna by 12 seconds from Alain Prost. He has led 40 laps total. We have had 2 lead changes between Senna and Alain Prost, both of those coming on pit stops. Cars out of the race, Pedro Lamy, who was knocked out at the very first corner, Pierluigi Martini with an engine failure, Johnny Herbert with similar problems, Ukio Katayama, Michael Schumacher, whose Ford V8 let go, Mika Hakkinen with brake problems, we are now told, and Eddie Irvine with undiagnosed problems at this point. Eddie Irvine nosed the car into the tire barriers hard, but we don't know if he broke a suspension or steering or brakes or whatever. Nevertheless, he is out of his second Grand Prix start. Damon Hill motors around. I believe he has held his 3rd place despite that pit stop. He had a big gap over the 4th place car of Jean Alesi. Ayrton Senna has reset fast lap. Senna's pole position for today's race broke 115 miles per hour. The first Formula One car to do that, setting a new record for the Adelaide Street Circuit. Now you ride along with Riccardo Patrese in the Benetton.
And the Williams pit board has just let Alain Prost know that Damon Hill, in fact, has been in for his 2nd set of tires. So now he can make his own mind up whether he wants to make a stop immediately or wait to some later date. But Damon Hill may be stopping early because, remember, he caught Alain Prost, wasn't able to get by. But if he thought he was quicker, he'll make a stop, get it over early, and then try and make the pass while Prost actually makes a stop.
Now just ahead of Riccardo Patrese is J.J. Leto, running in 9th place. So this is a battle for position.
Patrese unemployed as of another hour, I would say. A lot of speculation as to what he'll do. Some people think he will do the Italian Touring Car Championship. You can hear that familiar metallic sound from the Ford V8 that we always hear when we're in car with one of these Benettons or one of the McLarens.
Ironic that we should be watching Ayrton Senna in the McLaren. It has also been postulated this weekend that Riccardo Patrese might make a fine number 2 for Mika Hakkinen with the McLaren team in 1994, when it will be McLaren Peugeot. The French automaker has an exclusive new V10 engine for the McLaren team next year. There you see Senna's pit. The Williams team is also ready, presumably for Alain Prost. Damon Hill having already made a pit stop.
And you can very clearly hear the traction control working on the McLaren. Hear that misfire? That's not a misfiring engine. That's the spark being cut to some of the cylinders to slow the power delivery to the rear wheels down. The wheels bite again, and away she goes.
Worker retrieves his hat. He'll pay a penalty for that, I can tell you that. A few years ago, a worker was caught on a trackside security camera in Monaco smoking a cigarette, which of course is verbatim in a motor race. And it is said that Prince Albert of Monaco, his own self, who holds a high position in the Motoring Club of Monaco, saw to it that that worker had served his last Grand Prix of Monte Carlo. Ayrton Senna on to the Brabham Straight. Notice all of the marbles, little bits of rubber at the side of the racing line. Caught at 276 kilometers an hour on the radar gun on the Brabham Straight.
You can see the gap there, Senna to Damon Hill, 36 seconds. Not the best of time to pull up that graphic, because remember, it's just after a lengthy pit stop. When Hill settles down and begins to use those new tires, remember, Senna's only had one stop, Damon Hill's had 2. Senna's car is lighter, remember, the Ford V8 engine with the lighter fuel load. Will he try and go with just one stop? You remember, he will have that final decision. I suppose he could, I was just about to say he could wait to see what Alain Prost does. Prost realizes he cannot catch him with sheer speed, so he's got to make a second stop, and hopefully new tires will make him faster. The rear jack guy really nailed it that time. Right in, first time, gets it up, but it's still only 6.9.
He had a 20-second lead over his teammate Damon Hill. Alain Prost back out. He will give up a big chunk of time to Ayrton Senna, and at this point now, Prost can only hope that he can force Senna into having to pit for another set of tires. To do that, he's going to have to start gaining ground in big bunches.
Believe it or not, the Williams engineers never got these cars to handle well here all weekend. Prost and Damon Hill complained of excessive oversteer, not quite able to put their finger on the problem. And of course, in days gone by, even a poor handling Williams was way quicker than everything else. But now, the other teams, as Damon Hill said earlier, have caught up. So therefore, you have to have the Williams absolutely on the mark, or else you struggle just a little bit, as they are today.
There is Damon Hill. You see how close he is to Prost at this point.
So he didn't pull it off. He stopped earlier, got his tires earlier, because he couldn't pass him on the racetrack earlier. However, he didn't manage to pull it off, even though Prost had that later pit stop. Now it's a straight fight. Now if you're going to finish ahead of him, you have to attack him and pass him on the racetrack.
This battle going on a full 30 seconds behind race leader Ayrton Senna. Look at that rear suspension working.
Hydraulically controlled and electronically controlled rear suspension. Damon Hill sets fast as that. But look at the suspension goes up and down because the underside of the car, which creates so much downforce, is what they try to remain constant. Keep it at a constant level to the road, and it generates the maximum amount of downforce. That is what active suspension is all about.
And we are watching it for the last time in Formula One, at least for the foreseeable future.
Well, we think we are. It will take a fleet of very intelligent lawyers to write rules watertight enough to stop these multi-million-dollar designers from actually finding a way around the regulations. History shows they normally find a way around it and make these just as fast.
Ayrton Senna leads. More from Australia in just a moment. Probably no more popular memory, symbol, if you will, of Australia than the koala bear. There's a happy family shot on a local game preserve. I don't know why producers never use shot where the talents are smiling. The koalas were smiling. Riding aboard Damon Hill's, Williams Renault as they rocket past Alain Prost at the top of your screen. Damon Hill just behind him, running second and third.
J.J. Leto got a lesson in Portugal from the organizers when they black flagged him for a short interview because he held up the leader. He held up Alain Prost here because Damon Hill did eat into that lead. Then Leto moved aside, let both cars by. But Damon Hill actually is the fastest man on the racetrack at the moment. Equaled Michael Schumacher's lap record set last year at a 1:16.078. He is in a challenging position, about to challenge Alain Prost for that second place. Look at this under braking. Closes right up behind him.
Brake discs glowing red, thousands of degrees Fahrenheit in temperature. Past the grandstands of this temporary circuit. Once again, keep in mind, all of that you saw in that wide picture there, the grandstands, the hospitality suites, the garages, the pits, everything comes down after this race is over, and Victoria Park becomes a horse racing facility once again, a turf course. The running order as you watch the battle between the Williams teammates: Senna, Prost and Hill, Alesi, Berger, Brundle, Wendlinger, Aguri Suzuki, J.J. Leto, and Ricardo Patrese, your top 10. Then it's Derek Warwick in the footwork and Mark Blundell. Behind him, Rubens Barrichello, Eric Comas, Andre De Cesaris, and Toshio Suzuki of Japan. The only cars still in the running. 16 of the 24 starters. Now here comes Ayrton Senna in for his second stop.
29 seconds. He was clear of Alain Prost. Look at this. Oh, 5 seconds dead. Almost nailed Schumacher's pit stop time. That will definitely keep him in the lead. However, Prost will be closer.
Now keep in mind, even though they use those expensive tire warmers to bring these tires up to about 200 degrees, they are not quite race ready. Now here you see the second and third place Williams cars behind Aguri Suzuki in the footwork and likely to be holding them up.
Now we can see that Damon Hill, through the twisty sections, under braking, and in the high downforce section, seems to be faster than Prost. Now look at the gap between Senna and Prost, 18 seconds. But yes, when they get down to Stag Corner, which is the last right-hander onto that back straight, Prost seems to have the legs on Damon Hill. That Stag Corner that just came through here. Here's the fast kink, great overhead shots here. Now the long blast, the only time they use sixth gear, 185 miles an hour, even in racing conditions. And this is where Prost is quicker than Hill.
Hill dives down underneath. Alain Prost put himself in some jeopardy there. He's way out on the marbles.
Okay, now this section of the track, Hill was quicker. There's more traffic. He needs help from traffic if he's going to make a lunge down the inside of Prost.
Renault horsepower propelling them through traffic. Prost goes around the Tyrrell of Andre De Cesaris, and Hill slips through as well.
Very easy to forget that Damon Hill is in his first full season of Grand Prix racing. I mean, literally a raw novice plucked from obscurity by Frank Williams, and to think that he won 3 Grand Prix races and could finish second in the World Championship, to me, is a remarkable feat.
There you see the Williams team has won twice in Australia, both at the hands of Alain Prost. Damon Hill is racing this course for the first time. He set foot on it for the first time last Thursday, drove a race car on it on Friday, and here he is contending for second place.
in the World Championship. Now, if Senna wins, and he's leading quite comfortably and controlling the pace now, if Senna does manage to win this race, it's over. He will take second place in the championship, which to Senna doesn't make any difference in the world. However, to Damon Hill, I think definitely something personal to him in the book of statistics. In the long run, doesn't make any difference.
Damon Hill, the first son of a Formula One world champion of the modern era to win a Grand Prix, and he won 3 on the trot, as he likes to say.
Of the modern era was the key phrase.
Absolutely. I took a sound beating from many of our viewers.
Yes.
After announcing him as the first son of a Grand Prix winner to claim his own Grand Prix victory. Of course, Grand Prix racing goes back to the turn of the century. Records can be somewhat incomplete and spotty at times. But taking the Formula One era since 1950, Damon Hill is, in fact, the first son of a Grand Prix winner since 1950, the Formula One era, the World Championship era, if you will, to win a Grand Prix.
There's the Ilmor V10 being passed by the Renault V10. Mercedes-Benz are now part owners of the Ilmor Engine Company. And what does that mean? Well, one of the things it means is that Mercedes-Benz are officially back in Grand Prix racing, but also the Penske Ilmor Indy engines for next year will carry the Mercedes-Benz star on their rocker covers, or valve covers, depending which side of the Atlantic Ocean you come from.
Oh! J.J. Leto flies over the curbing.
Did we almost see a backflip or what from J.J. Leto? Got it wrong on the turn-in, hit the inside curve, and then it was almost another Patrese and Fittipaldi type accident all over again.
The only spot on the racetrack where he had enough room to land on his wheels without clouding something very, very solid. You see him go way up in the air, come down on a second curb, tearing big chunks off the car, and then he spins to a stop against the wall.
If he was doing 15 miles an hour more, that car, I think, would have done a complete backflip.
Whoa. We'll take a deep breath as the battle between the Williams-Renault teammates continues for second place. Prost against Hill. Ayrton Senna, 18 seconds up the road.
Another look. This is a scary moment for J.J. Leto. Watch what happens here. Out of control as of now. This is a launching ramp. Watch how high he gets. That is a scary moment for Leto. I honestly believe 15 miles an hour more, which is almost any other place on the racetrack, that would have been a backflip and something very, very serious and dangerous.
As it is, J.J. Leto is out of the race, leaving us 15 cars still at it. There is Ayrton Senna in his last race for the McLaren team. After 6 years of achievement, including 3 world championships, he took his 62nd career pole in record time for this Grand Prix of Australia, seeking his second victory since 1985 here on the streets of Adelaide. He closes up on his former McLaren teammate, Gerhard Berger, himself a 2-time winner of this race.
Berger still troubled by that elbow problem he had earlier in the season. He had an infection. The wound never closed. He's still bothered by it. He does have to go back and have some more surgery on that. Said he hasn't had a holiday this year yet, but he doesn't really want to move away and go on holiday. He said he wants to start testing immediately with the passive Ferrari to try and get this team further down the road to competitiveness for next season.
In fact, Gerhard Berger is falling apart. During the 2-week break between Japan and Australia, he split a tooth somehow and made several visits to the dentist to get that repaired. Must have been knocking coconuts out of the trees in Tahiti or something with his face. He lets his former teammate, the race leader, Ayrton Senna, through. Certainly Gerhard Berger doesn't want to get punched after the race the way Eddie Irvine was. In fact, Gerhard Berger was asked about that whole incident. Berger said, well, I can tell you something that none of you knew before this. Ayrton Senna took boxing lessons in the off-season and was just waiting for an opportunity to let somebody have it.
This is a great fight here. Damon Hill and Alain Prost. Prost would like to win. He'll be happy with second. Damon Hill can prove a point here because he has been criticized that in racing conditions he is not decisive enough sometimes. He could wipe that criticism away in one fell swoop here if he can pull one off over Alain Prost. Lots of oil on the front of Damon Hill's car and on his visor.
There you see 17 laps remaining, 62 complete. This race was scheduled to go 81 laps. The first two were done at basically a walking pace as they struggled to get the entire field of 24 underway. It took 2 restarts to get us started.
Great shot here. Great shot here. Look at the front wing. Hardly moves, but look at that front suspension. Up and down, up and down. Designed to keep that front wing and the rest of the car at the optimum downforce settings. That means the optimum ride height.
Notice the lower wishbones, that V-shaped appendage attached to the lower part of the wheel. On the new Simtech Formula One car that we'll see in 1994, that lower wishbone is raised up. Both of the wishbones attach on the upper portion of the wheel in order to get them both up out of the airstream under the car. It was originally designed by its mentor, Nick Wirth, to be a cantilever suspension, one solid wishbone, if you will, at the top of the wheel, but that was ruled ineligible under the new specifications for 1994, so it will have 2 wishbones, both very high on the side pod. Damon Hill resets fast lap, a new record, breaking 1:16. While we're on the subject of 1994, we should mention that the proposed schedule is now out. South Africa officially off. We should open in March with Argentina and Brazil, although the Argentina race we learned this weekend may be in some financial difficulty before it ever happens. If it does, it will be a street circuit in Buenos Aires. The Pacific Grand Prix replaces the European Grand Prix at Donington Park. It will most likely be held in Japan. Then San Marino, Monaco in midway, a very early date for Monaco, which normally is very late in May, around Indianapolis 500 time. Then Barcelona, Spain. Moving on later in the year, Canada, France, Great Britain, Germany drops back a week. Hungary is very much on the ropes and might also be replaced next year. Then Belgium. And we'll wrap things up in the final third of the season. Italy, Portugal, and then 1 week separating Japan and Australia.
And the little birdie told me that don't be surprised to see an Indonesian Grand Prix on the schedule of races very soon, maybe even next season.
Just outside of Jakarta, Indonesia, a racetrack has been built, and it is hosting saloon car races, what we would call stock cars, as they try to convince Formula One officials to bring a race there. We also understand that the Gulf nation of Qatar has signed a contract for a race in 1996 at a $30 million motorsports facility to be built in the desert. Race leader Ayrton Senna going around the LaRousse teammates, but the fastest lap of the race now being pummeled by Damon Hill, still shown in third position behind his teammate Alain Prost.
Damon Hill has now set about 4 or 5 fastest laps in a row, and he is still behind Alain Prost. I don't understand that fully. Surely, if he's going that fast on a regular basis, he can actually get by Alain Prost.
Just a couple of tenths of a second separate the Williams-Renault teammates. We'll take a quick time out and return to the Grand Prix of Australia as the laps continue to dwindle. Stay with us. Phil Terrace, normally in the streets of Adelaide, Australia, but on this weekend it is the Brabham Straightaway. Bob Barsha, Derek Daly, glad to have you with us. Race leader Ayrton Senna goes rocketing around. He has put Derek Warwick running 10th, now 2 laps down, and begins to close in on the Tyrrell of Andrea de Cesaris.
You mentioned the Brabham Straight, of course. Brabham, oh, look at this. Andrea de Cesaris almost has another victim in Ayrton Senna. Why does he not just move out of the way? Doesn't he see him? Eventually he does see him. Senna won't like that. But I mentioned Brabham, one of the most famous names in racing, particularly here in Australia. You may be interested to know that Jack Brabham went to the company's registrar in England and realized that the Brabham Formula One team had not kept up officially the company name Brabham. Jack went and registered it, so he now says the only way Brabham will be back in Formula One is if he brings the name back.
Certainly the name worthy of some respect, and certainly the Brabham team in its later races was not giving the name the performance that it deserved. You notice Ayrton Senna's lead is now dwindling just a bit over Alain Prost. It is down to some 11 seconds. Prost took off some 2 seconds. No doubt because Ayrton Senna was making his way through traffic. Now Derek Warwick comes under fire from the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger.
And that is not for position. Warwick, Berger, or De Cesaris are not in a fight for position. Look at this.
Oh,
he loses it.
Goes. Damon Hill has spun it. A half spin. Now
Hill stalled it. Did he stall it?
No, he's got it going.
He's got reverse.
Now,
very difficult to get reverse sometimes.
Look at the blisters on the shoulder of that right front tire. Now, he spun the car in Friday's practice and had a problem getting it in first gear, but he obviously gets it going again. But now I'm wondering about the condition of those tires.
Well. There's the opportunity. Here it is again. Sticks his nose down the inside. Doesn't get away with it. Does a lazy half spin and is very lucky that he didn't collect the concrete wall. And then that Ligier that went across his bows as he tried to come back on the racetrack. But interestingly enough, we did see the blisters on that right front tire. Just on that inside edge, that's the edge that gets the hottest because of the negative camber on the front of these wheels. Here's another look. There's the blisters. Watch the Ligier go by. Grabs first gear. Zing! There you go. That was almost a Ligier autograph all over the camel stickers on the front of that Williams.
Foot ornament it might have been. That was Mark Blundell's Ligier. Martin Brundle was driving the radically repainted Ligier this weekend, as he did in Japan 2 weeks ago. Brundle is in the 6th and final points-paying position right now. It is Senna, Prost, Hill, Alesi, Berger, Brundle, Wendlinger, Suzuki, Patrese, Warwick, Blundell, Barrichello, Comas, De Cesaris, and Suzuki. 15 cars still circulating. There's Carl Wendlinger, who has Aguri Suzuki right behind him, and then Ricardo Patrese. This is for position. This is 7th, 8th, and 9th, all running one lap down.
Hear that familiar metallic Ford V8 engine noise. Always sounded as something was broken. Never was. Here's where J.J. Leto went off.
Lots of downshifting before he hits that chicane. He went down 3 gears, I think. Now there's Alain Prost, who suddenly is relieved of the pressure Damon Hill was putting on him. Hill had a big gap back to Jean Alesi in 4th, however, so Hill retains 3rd spot. Prost has fallen back about a second to race leader Ayrton Senna. There you see the gaps, 13.1 seconds. Alain Prost down to Senna, and then 29 more back to Hill.
Prost has been a double winner here in Adelaide. Says he would like to still come to the Grand Prix races next year. Is not sure that he wants to come as a television commentator, which he did last year. He said he would be interested in a management position with some team. He didn't mention the team. I know he's had extensive talks with Ligier, which never did come to anything. So you may still see Prost's familiar face at the Grand Prix. But he said the number one thing he wants to do is spend more time with his family.
There you see the gap widens out still. Actually, what he said was, I don't want to come and be a commentator. I'd rather do something challenging.
He did actually say that.
Thanks,
that
pal.
was his official comment.
I wish you a happy retirement, buddy.
Luckily, he didn't say something like that at the start of the year, that we'd never talk about him.
Actually, the Renault company says they would like Alain Prost to come along in an advisory role, much like Niki Lauda performs for Ferrari. This weekend, we've learned that Niki Lauda is being paid $3 million this year for that advisory role. If I were Prost, I believe I'd take it. 8 laps remaining.
Oh, I think consultants to teams are definitely worth $3 million.
Who have you been consulting with lately?
You realize Senna will make history again? The last race in Japan, 103 Grand Prix wins, equaled the number set by Ferrari. He will now become, he has the opportunity to make McLaren the all-time winner in Grand Prix racing as we know it today.
After the race, Ayrton Senna addressed the press, and he was asked to assess his role and how much taking McLaren into a tie with Ferrari meant to him. Here's his response.
It's a great record that the team has achieved, and I am very happy that I have contributed a little bit for that. At the same time that Mika has done extremely well, and for the team to be first and third here, it's a tremendous result. And I think it's a very good start for him and a very good way to finish for me.
Well, Ayrton Senna seeks his 41st Grand Prix win and seeks to set McLaren above Ferrari in the all-time standings. Great battle going on here, and we'll be back to it in just a moment. Tonight on the season premiere of ESPN Sunday Night NFL, a couple of teams with lots to prove. The Indianapolis Colts behind quarterback Jeff George and the Washington Redskins behind Mark Rippon trying to recapture Super Bowl glory. It's the Colts and the Redskins tonight on ESPN Sunday Night NFL, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Bob Barsha, Derek Daly. We are watching the Grand Prix of Australia as Damon Hill, running in third place, comes up behind one of the LaRousse cars, and just ahead the footwork of Derek Warwick. That is Eric Comas just ahead, I believe, running in the 12 spot. Derek Warwick in the 11 hole.
This is down through the East Terrace. This is one of the left-right flick chicanes down to Stag Corner. Now the blast down the long back straight. We have the little kink first. Damon Hill pulls out, can't get by. That's the Lamborghini V12 in the LaRousse car. And here we go. The only time they use 6th gear. 1 time per lap.
There. 4 laps remaining as Damon Hill takes it around. Ooh, Derek Warwick almost had a LaRousse stuffed under his right side wheels as the cars rocket back into Victoria Park.
Senna's other team members. What's this? Here's another one.
Carl
His teammate does it. Wendlinger in the same position as J.J. Leto, and that actually loses him that position. He was running in 7th place, so now Suzuki moves up, Patrese moves up, and Warwick, I believe, also moves up. So Wendlinger, you could see he actually lost a lot more speed than J.J. Leto because that car did not take off like late J.J. Leto's did.
Gonna have to call that Sauber corner.
Scary Sauber corner. Look at the oil on Damon Hill's rear wing and all over the front of that car.
Up front, Ayrton Senna begins to close up on the number 27 Ferrari of Jean Alesi, running in 4th place. So Ayrton Senna, with another bravura performance, is working on lapping the field here. He will not get it done. Alain Prost just 14 seconds behind in 2nd. Damon Hill 44 seconds behind the leader in 3rd. But it'll be just the podium finishers, it would appear, who will remain unlapped.
I was just about to mention how confident the team is. They're already beginning to pack up everything from the pit lane and put it away because they think their man has this sewn up and he will not need their assistance in these closing laps.
One of the nice things about the last race of the year is even though the equipment is packed up, lots of uniform parts and other things are not. And the world's biggest garage sale goes on in the pit lane here at the Adelaide Grand Prix circuit.
What a great way to end your career with a team such as McLaren, to go out on such a double winning note. Japan We put Japan down to the weather conditions where he shines so well, but this is the first time he's actually taken everybody on equal footing on a dry racetrack and dominated. This is the Ayrton Senna we have seen over the last couple of years, but this has been a struggle year for McLaren to try and make this car competitive. But you know, great teams always have a habit of still becoming successful even in adverse conditions. That's what we have seen McLaren do. But Senna will walk away and not give it a glance as he moves on to Williams.
Ayrton Senna, before the swing to Japan and Australia, considered not driving for McLaren as a result of a press conference that the team manager Ron Dennis held with the British press, in which he said some unkind things about Senna. At that point, Ron Dennis apparently spoke to Nigel Mansell about possibly replacing Senna in the car for the end of the year. I'm sure Ayrton Senna is glad that he came on to Japan and Australia, where he will pick up 2 victories, it appears, and this man, Alain Prost, 282 kilometers per hour. Multiply times 0.6 to give yourself some idea of how fast that is, or just round it off as plenty fast. Prost apparently will finish second. He will have 1 lap to go when he crosses the start-finish line as he re-enters Victoria Park.
And a glorious career Alain Prost has had. He won't quite make 800 points, but believe it or not, if he finishes second and gets 6 points, he will score 798.5 points total in a glorious career. 13 poles out of 15 races this year, 7 wins. How could Ferrari have fired this man back in 1991? A glorious career from Alain Prost.
That man, Ayrton Senna, ranked along with Prost as the best Grand Prix drivers of their generation, perhaps among the best all-time, well, certainly among the best all-time. Ayrton Senna has accumulated just over 600 points. I believe he will finish the day, should he win the race, with about 612. 614, I am corrected by our statisticians. Alain Prost has nearly 800.
And to give you an idea, another idea, or more emphasis, how dominant these two people have been in Formula One. They both drove for McLaren, remember. Between the two of them, they had 65 Grand Prix race wins. And look at Senna, waves to his crew as he takes the checkered flag once again. 7 of 9 World Championships these two men have taken between them. And Alain Prost, his final checkered flag is only second. But what a glorious career. And Damon Hill, I think he was superb today and takes away with him the lap record.
It is truly the end of an era. I'm sure in his car, within his balaclava and his helmet, Ayrton Senna has a few tender thoughts for the McLaren team with which he has accomplished so much. And perhaps Alain Prost has some as well as he brings his career to a conclusion. Ayrton Senna joins the very select club of 2-time Australian Grand Prix winners here in Adelaide. Behind them, perhaps appropriate that Damon Hill should be in third as he attempts to join the front rank of Grand Prix drivers, the future of the sport, even though he and Ayrton Senna are virtually the same age.
Will they shake hands? Will Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost ever make it up and become friends as they now go totally separate ways, different lifestyles from here on in? Alain Prost doesn't even drive up alongside Ayrton Senna to offer his congratulations after the race win.
We'll learn more when they mount the podium, and we'll be back for that. This ESPN Speed World presentation has been brought to you by Mazda. Mazda, it just feels right. And by Suzuki. Your Suzuki motorcycle and ATV dealer has the ride you've been waiting for and the financing to get it. The celebrations have begun in the pit lane, and the final race of the 1993 Formula One World Driving Championship is now done. Here's a look at the final results of the Grand Prix of Australia. Ayrton Senna with his 5th win of the year, 41st of his career, and makes McLaren the all-time winningest constructors in Formula One history. Alain Prost finishes 2nd, followed by teammate Damon Hill, Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger in their Ferraris, and Martin Brundle. As we take a look down through the rest of the classified finishers, Derek Daly, your thoughts on the race?
Well, not one of the classic all-time races that we will remember in the years to come. However, it is the day that Alain Prost made a friendship with Ayrton Senna and walked away from the sport that made him famous and very wealthy.
Alain Prost, the only French world champion, picks up his 4th this year. Ayrton Senna knocks down 2nd, followed by Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, Riccardo Patrese, and Jean Alesi. In the Constructors' Championship, Williams-Renault doubled the point total of runner-up McLaren Ford. Benetton Ford finishes 3rd. Now here is race winner Ayrton Senna.
I had a tremendous time. You know, the records speak for themselves, the results, the championships, and I got respect from the people who I work with so long. I have tremendous respect for them as well. I leave friends behind, and I think that's the best way to do, leaving friends behind, winning last race, coping in an extremely difficult season with the technical reasons that we all know, and winning 5 races. It is tremendous.
Suzuki Motorcycles race winner Ayrton Senna. Checkered flag coverage of the Grand Prix of Australia will be coming your way Wednesday, November 10th at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Pacific. Moments after the race, this was the scene in the garage as Ron Dennis and Ayrton Senna bid one another goodbye after 6 very productive and sometimes antagonistic years together. And certainly the same goes for Senna and Alain Prost, with whom he has been arch rivals for going on a decade. We'll leave you with some of our thoughts on the season just passed. Of course, we couldn't go away without reminding you of Michael Andretti, who came into this season with such high expectations and suffered such incredible disappointments. But in the end, he got on the podium at Monza, and perhaps that will go a long way toward making him realize the exercise was worthwhile.
And it is the end of the era of the most sophisticated racing car ever built for this sport. How fast will the cars go next year? Well, the tears will roll again next year for Michael Schumacher because he will be a major star name. But disaster almost befell Damon Hill on many occasions.
After wading through engine explosions and tire explosions, Hill took a victory at Hungary and followed it with 2 more at Spa in Belgium and Monza in Italy, and truly lived up to the legacy of his father, the late 2-time world champion, Graham Hill. For Ayrton Senna, well, the chapter closes on his time at McLaren that included so many race victories and 3 world championships. Now he will pass the team over to young Finn Mika Hakkinen and open a new chapter in his glittering career with the Williams-Renault team.
Ayrton Senna now takes his customary holiday in Brazil on the beach, and Alain Prost, he goes from the cockpit to the golf course.
I'm Bob Varsha for Derek Daly, James Allen, and all of us here on the Formula One crew at ESPN Speed World. Thanks for being with us. It all begins again in the springtime of 1994, and we hope you'll be with us. Until then, so long, everyone.